Hi, Regina. Hello and welcome to ThePrint.
Hi, Tina. Thank you so much.
Um, I am already a big fan. So this was my personal push to have an interview with you. And
That's so sweet. Thank you.
so,
Thank you for making this happen as well.
so I'm starting with your OTT journey so far. So you had like Rocket Boys, which was like a big success. And then you have had Ars Tutorial, which is again a horror series. And you also have Shulveer coming up, the videos doing rounds of you being a total badass. So, how are you? What is your criteria of choosing roles? Because all three roles are so different from each other.
Firstly, thank you so much. It feels nice when your work is appreciated. Um, the thing that I've always followed is be it OTT or anything to do with cinema. Um, I've always wanted to be versatile. I think that's been my driving force. That's what I spearhead with. And hence, I think I've created that niche for myself where people can actually come up to me and give me any sort of a script, and it doesn't have to pertain to one particular kind of character. I'd love to do your pakka commercial entertainers, and I'd also love to do some real films. I'd also love to do some horror, some thriller, some true crime drama. So I feel like it comes from the want to just do it all and know exactly where I fit in and what I can do better.
So I think in 2018, "Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To Aisa Laga" is where let's say the North Indian belt of the country, let's say, finally had a glimpse of you. I was a much appreciated film, much appreciated role, in fact, and you stood out. And suddenly there was like, okay, who is this person in this film? People were like Googling. So anything more in Bollywood that, because I think it does, or at least the audience misses you for sure.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's a good thing, and that's a good thing. First of all, it's also a bad thing because now you're just like, okay, I should feed my audience something, but that can be a very tricky thing for an actor. I have had a really good run in the South, and I'm still running. It's still not yet over. In fact, it's funny because however much I do, in fact, one of my there's another web series of mine that has released. It's called Fingertip Season 2.
Right.
It happened to be my first Tamil. So I've done Tamil, Telugu, and Hindi, and I'm very happy that this has like gotten to see all of it come out. I don't think I can ask for anything more. And in Chennai, also a lot of people were like, "Why aren't you doing any Tamil films? When are we going to see you next?" First of all, I'm happy that people want to see more of me. What more can I even ask for? And when it comes to Bollywood, I think um, now that I'm older and wiser, I hope I'd like to take it slow and make my decisions. I have a really good team, artist management that I work with, who um, does everything that needs to be done for an actor. Because as an actor, I come to the thought process of I'd like things to be organic. So when it comes to things like networking, which works very well in Bollywood, it's something that I've just found myself not being able to do that much. Um, and not for the lack of trying also, but I realize it's just not my cup of tea. It's not something that comes naturally to me to network and to talk about my work and to be like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing this, because there's so many things that I'm doing, and I honestly believe my work should speak for itself. So that's where my team plays a really important role. And having gotten Rocket Boys and having gotten all of this in the OTT journey, I'm sure it'll translate into films. I don't want to like make this immediate move, jump, leap, start. I've always been the kind of person that takes one step at a time. I can't just run. I believe that if I do, then burnout is really, really easy. And that too, being in this industry, it's very easy to become non-relevant. So to keep yourself relevant, I think you have to form a steady pace. So hopefully you will see something soon in terms of Bollywood, in terms of films as well. But yeah.
So I'll come back to Anya's tutorial. So how difficult or what are the challenges in shooting a horror? It's a series, so again a series. And are you afraid of ghosts?
um, I'll answer your second question first. I used to be afraid of ghosts as a kid when, you like logic is thrown out of the window immediately at the sound of anything. But growing up, I understood things and I'm not afraid as such. I'm not scared, no. In fact, I think my curiosity has gotten the better of me. So when something happens, I'm way more curious, but I know I need to be safe. So I've had one paranormal experience in my view, and it didn't leave me scarred, thankfully. And shooting for a horror show, film, it was very exciting because it was not just horror. Anya's tutorial, it was also like a psychological thriller. There was this innate sense of uneasiness that the two characters had when you see them. So it felt good to have to dwell over Addu's character and why was she like this as a kid and what brought about the whole thing. Shooting for horror is tough, especially when things are flying around in the room and you are just like screaming and yelling, and then you have to get the camera angles right, you have to get the movements of the things right. There was one scene that we did that like we had to like do some, I think 10 takes at least. So shooting horror, it takes quite a bit physically and mentally from the actor, a little more than it would normally for me at least. And also, Anya's tutorial in particular, we shot Tamil and Telugu.
Mm-hmm.
So that was even more of a challenge because you would say the same dialogue in Tamil and then you'd say the same thing in Telugu. And you maintain continuity throughout for Tamil and Telugu separately. So it was quite a task and it was very challenging, which was the best part of the whole thing. Like to see if you can actually like live up to doing something like this was the main thing for me. And see, the thing with horror is it's very tricky. It's either you've hit it or you've missed it, and you are going to have mixed reviews. I was very open to knowing that maybe some people didn't like it, or maybe some people loved it, and which age group loved it, because then it makes. I like to streamline these things because I will not get a more random population than an audience.
Right.
For me, it's important to understand who has liked what. I like to go into specifics.
Okay. So coming from audience reaction, so the audience reaction to your chemistry with Ishwak in Rocket Boys was tremendous. I remember like there was a time when Instagram and everybody's like, oh, this iconic scene where, the proposal scene of with a rocket, or, dialogues or your character, because it is a very, very strong female character, woman who knows her own mind, a woman who's doing what she wants to do. And, that whole arc and everything, and everybody was talking about it, because usually if you have two guys, two scientists, two real life figures in a show, and then to have actually people talk about actually the women, I think it's in itself a big deal, I feel. But yeah, I wanted to know what was that like, because I never seen endless reels. Everybody was like, oh, get yourself a guy. Like, I'm like, okay then.
That's really cute. It's fun. It's really nice as when you play a scene as an actor and then people connect to the things that you connected to while doing the scene, as in while portraying those characters and while being those people. Right. It's really nice to see, because then you're like, okay, it's actually been conveyed. And, that was one scene that we did a lot of rehearsals for. I mean, not like we had to work on it as such, but so my favorite, I wouldn't say favorite genre, but I like doing romantic scenes, because being different characters in different films, you portray it differently. And the challenge as Mrinalini was to portray it as a young girl who was also, like has all this life and energy in her. And how would it be to portray it like Mrinalini Sarabhai would, and you're also playing a real life person, right? So all of that made it all the more interesting to play as a character. It had to be subtle. It also had to have like a little, energy in it, and like some electrifying this thing because of his dialogue. Also, it was like gravity. He says so. It had to have. If that dialogue had to be there, it had to have substance enough for that dialogue to actually make sense. Um, and yeah, so I'm so happy that scene came out really well. In fact, one of my favorite scenes to play as well.
Okay. So what do you think? Like, since you've done films and now, like, OTT ventures, which have also been successful. So how do they differ in terms of the role and how do you play it?
See, doing an OTT show requires a lot more in depth into the characters.
Mm-hmm.
The writer, the director, the actors have a lot more scope to build the character.
Right.
So you're living with the character. I've seen how Ishwak and Jim like lived with their characters throughout Rocket Boys. I've seen how most of the shows that I've done, everyone spending a lot. As an actor, you spend a lot more time understanding the character and the role. Not that you don't for a film, but shoots are way more for your web series, way more than shooting a film also. And I like the process of OTT. I think that's the major difference that I see as an actor when it comes to OTT and films. Yeah.
Okay, so AHA is a regional OTT platform. And in general as well, Telugu movies, in fact, at least, in the last 2 years or so for sure, have managed to completely cross over. It has become more global, right? But there's also this whole space for local, regional stories, which are original. So I just want to know, how do you think, a platform like this helps to get very local stories, which might not always find space, even when you have a Telugu film industry, even you have, let's say, a Tamil film industry, sometimes the very local elements, actors, art, maybe don't find space. But do you think something like a local OTT platform gives that space or creates that space or makes that space bigger maybe than what it has been there around?
Yes, I mean, definitely gives space for more ideas, for more stories, for everything. It gives everyone a bigger platform. OTT in general does that. When it comes to regional OTT, everyone is getting into the regional OTT space right now because now that you've cracked the global market, everyone wants to come into the regional market, obviously, right? But again, this is my view on the whole thing. I feel like the OTT space, there is way more want than there is enough being churned out.
Okay.
The need is a lot more than the supply, basically. I feel like OTT is so nascent still, as in it's still in its nascent stages, although we've had it around for quite a while. It's still in its nascent stages in which people are still warming up, especially regional OTT. People are still warming up to the whole, how do we make web series? Now, everyone is thinking how to make a web series. So much so, writers and directors who have stories from long ago, which were meant to be films, are now thinking how to convert it into an OTT. Which in my perspective, and all of these are my own views, okay, making them very clear. I think people need to start thinking, if they want to make a web series, they need to start thinking as a show and not think of how to drag and stretch a film into a show. I mean, it can work for few. This is not the rule for everything, I would say, but it would work for a few. But there's a lot more that you need to spend time on doing when it comes to web series, and this only comes from my limited experience
Mhm.
in the web series sector of things. I have directors coming to me saying, we wrote this as a film, we would like to make it a show, and I'm like, unless I see it as a show, I cannot say I can do it, because as a film I like a story, but what are we going to do for 7 episodes? It's so important because everything changes now. So I feel like, coming back to my point, there's a lot more demand because everyone's entering the space than people can supply, because people are still thinking theatrical, 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 theatrical. But the world clearly has to move differently, because people are also saying, if you think, okay, this film has released, you're like, I'll just wait for it to come on OTT, unless it's some, like some really big film, and you rather watch it in IMAX.
Hmm.
I don't see people thronging to theaters as they did before. So everyone's mindset is still in the midst of this whole change of, okay, how do we now resolve to this? How do we make this big? I think till that happens, it's going to be really crazy in the OTT market. Everyone wants to do a show today. Everyone wants to be a part of it, but can we is going to be the question that we need to answer.
Hmm. I come back to Anya's tutorial, and it's a cyber web horror show, something that again in India you don't we haven't done a lot. Again, horror movies or horror shows by themselves are not really like the biggest. It doesn't have as much production as, let's say, the other genres that we have, or as many, let's
Yeah.
say. So, what was the challenge like in doing something that's there? How did you prepare for something which is like so new, let's say, or experimental? If I may use the word, it's more experimental in space. Like you've already said,
Yeah.
the space is as much like horror, like the way we understand horror, maybe, as it is psychological, the ambience itself, right? So, how was it preparing for something like this?
Interesting that you use the phrase cyber horror, because I up until this interview I didn't think of it as cyber horror, but it does come along those lines as well. Uh, like you said, also in India we haven't really broken the whole horror thing. Like the number of films that we would do very different. I mean, we're very very much lesser compared to the rest of the films we make, and
Hmm.
I think it's time to like explore a little bit more. We've done great with horror comedy. I know that's one genre we've absolutely like hit it out of the park.
Right.
But when it comes to real, genuine horror stories, we, I don't think, have really. We have, but again, it's like very, like you said, very rare. So it's interesting to be in that space and to create something, because up until then, I never understood the space. Up until I got my hands dirty with the whole thing, as in like got into it and understood what it is and how it's done and everything. I didn't understand what you need to do a good horror film today, or a show. Today I can sit and say, okay, from my experience, if I'm going to do something else, I'm going to probably tweak it this way. So I have an understanding now. So that's something I look at it as. It's experimentative. I want to be a part of something that's experimentative, and two is it's a learning for me. So I understand how horror films are made or horror shows are made. What goes into making, what are the important aspects of making a horror film show, whatever. So for me, it's these two things: being a part of something experimental, and it's a learning process.
Hmm. Did you watch any horror films or shows before you did that, or do you like watching them?
I do like watching, and I take great pleasure in the fact that the fact that I had to watch. I'd watch a horror film, and sometimes I stay in hotels when I'm out of home, shooting and stuff. And I have to sleep in the dark. And a hotel room is not necessarily something you're used to all the time, but now every hotel room is the same for me. But I can come back and I have to sleep in the dark. So whether I watch a horror film or not, I just have to have my good night's sleep. So I'm someone who can handle horror films. I like making it a little weird. I don't know. I like this whole weird vibe that you probably give people through horror films, like a sort of like a uneasiness. I like it when the audience feels that uneasiness, because that's one of the things. that is very difficult to make people feel through visuals and sound. It has to be perfectly matching to make people feel a sort of weird, uneasy vibe.
Mhm.
The, yeah. So
Yeah.
I watch horror films in general. Sorry to break you there, but I watch horror films in general. I've seen horror films. I've seen shows. I like it. Um, uh, and like I said, I always wanted to understand
Hmm.
what it takes to make one and be in one.
I was just going for, could you tell us anything that, any favorites that you have?
I mean, Conjuring, yes, and there's one favorite scene of mine where I think it's in one or two. He just claps his hands by the side. So so that kind of a scene. Someone's in the basement. It's dark. It's the stairs. Something's gonna happen. There's probably a jump scare. Like you're waiting, and there's no music. That means for sure something's gonna happen. And it's just two hands that come and clap, and I was like, whoa. I was like, that's all it takes to, like, if you have your audience engaged, that's all it takes to just, like, create that feel. And that's something I enjoy.
Okay, there's a lot of horror for me today. I'll have difficulty sleeping probably. I'm not. I love watching
Are
it,
you?
and but
Yeah.
I'm also scared. So I'm that person who needs to watch them, but also is very scared. So trust me, I had a time watching Anya's tutorial as well, because I'm like, at halfway through, I'm like, I had to request somebody else. It's like, can you do the review? Because if I watch the full thing, I don't think I'll sleep for 2-3 days, and then it's going to be really difficult for me then. So yeah,
Okay, so we did our job then.
I could also be biased. Remember, I said I'm a fan, so I'm also like biased. So halfway through, I plowed, and I'm like, okay, no, this is going to get difficult after a point of time for me personally. But thank you so much for talking to me. It was wonderful to finally talk to a person you keep seeing on screen, I think. And
Thank you, Tina. The pleasure is all mine. And this was such a lovely interview. Thank you.
best of luck
Really.
for all the upcoming things you have. And like I said, I'll obviously very patiently or impatiently wait also for a Bollywood enterprise soon, hopefully.
Yes, please. Some patience will help. Definitely.
Okay. You have a
Thank you,
lovely,
Tina.
you have a lovely day.
You too.
Thank
You
you.
too. Bye.
Bye.